The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 31. The Loom Core Descent. The gate to the Loom Core was not a door. It was a seam, a silver thread stitched into the wall of the spiral's foundation. Velian touched it gently, and it unraveled. The air warped. A tunnel opened, woven not of stone, but of time folded over itself. Together, they stepped into the thread line, and the spiral city disappeared. They entered a circular chamber lined with clocks. But none moved. Each face bore not hours, but moments that never happened. A mother who never returned, a song never sung, and a version of Ares who ran away instead of rising. The air pulsed. You must let go of the lives you did not live. A voice whispered from nowhere and everywhere. Ares felt tears form, but the lion stood beside them, steady. They nodded, and the clocks cracked, dissolving into threads of light. A spiral staircase hung suspended over nothing. Each step behind them vanished once taken, a metaphor made real. Sela stumbled once, panicked. If we can't go back, then we choose forward, Ares whispered. The lion leaped ahead, landing with grace. The stair obeyed certainty. Doubt made it disappear. Together, they walked as one, until the stair became thread and passed into mist. At the center of it all stood the ancient loom, tall as a tower, spinning thread not into cloth, but into realities. Its spindles trembled. One glowed with the pattern of the spiral city. Another, a world undone. A third, a single child, dreaming alone. And at the center was a pulsing core, a seed of light wrapped in iron. The dreaming's heart, sealed long ago. To reach it, they had to step across the weft path, a shifting web of threads that rearranged with their thoughts. Each step forward summoned illusions, memories, fears, versions of self. Velian fell to his knees at the sight of his former comrades. Screaming accusations. Silas was swallowed by shadows of control. Ares stood alone on a cracked bridge, as every part of her whispered, "You're not enough. You're not real. You are just someone else's dream." But the lion stepped forward, and roared not sound, but truth. The illusions shattered. Finally, they reached it. The sealed dreaming. A sphere of light behind threads of time and metal. Eris raised the key of unbinding. It hummed in resonance. One by one, they each placed a hand on the loom, and it began to stitch them into the dream itself. Their thoughts became pattern. Their memories became thread. And the spiral began to tremble. Chapter 32. The Dream They Chose. The loom stilled. The threads paused mid-spin, glowing like constellations in a sky that had never been. In the breathless silence that followed, a circle formed around the dreaming's core. A moment outside of time. No more tests. Just one truth. The dream would become what they chose. Velian spoke first. "I once served order, absolute, cold, and unyielding. I believed control was mercy. But I see now. It was fear dressed in gears." He looked toward the others. "Let the dream remember freedom. Not the freedom to dominate, but the freedom to choose, to falter, to forgive." Sela stepped forward. "I was a blade. A lens, a lie." Her voice wavered. "I want to build what cannot be measured. Friendship, mystery, art." She reached out to touch the loom. "Let the dream remember wonder. Curiosity without fear of collapse." The lion placed its paw upon the core. Its voice was not sound, but a golden hum that echoed in their bones. "Let the dream remember instinct. The truth that roars before language. The wisdom of fur and fang, not to harm, but to protect what is sacred." The loom responded with a low pulse, ancient, approving. Eris closed her eyes. They saw every thread they'd carried, every life that might have been, every path they didn't walk. And then she saw the child they once were, sleeping beneath the broken sky, waiting. "Let the dream remember gentleness," she whispered. "Not as weakness, but as the seed of stars." She reached into the dreaming, and offered their name. Not the one given, the one she chose. The core began to bloom. Light spun outward in sacred spirals. Their shared choices wove together into a pattern not of dominance, but of balance, of wildness, forgiveness, beauty, wonder. The dreaming began to wake. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 33. The Threshold. There was no sound. Only light. Only silence. Only the slow dissolution of all that had been. The spiral city, the loom core, the gears of the clockmakers. All suspended like motes of dust in amber. Time bent inward. Thoughts no longer moved in lines. Memory softened into symbol. They floated in the in-between, not asleep, not awake, but becoming. They saw the remnants of the old dream. The towers of control built from fear. The mechanisms that measured every joy, and the silence of wonder crushed beneath order. They saw also the glimmerings of the new, a child offering a flower to a shadow, music blooming from forgotten walls, and clocks turned to gardens. The lion lay beside Iris, his head resting on her shoulder. Celis drifted nearby, curled like a leaf on a tide. Velian stared upward, watching galaxies thread themselves together, not as maps, but as poems. No one spoke. There was no need. Here, even breath was part of the story. A presence moved through them, vast and gentle. Not the weaver, not the dream, but the threshold itself. It asked no questions. It demanded no answers, only this. Will you carry it forward? Not power, not perfection, but the seed of what they had made. A dream born from choice, from brokenness, from love. They each whispered yes, not in words, but in the way light bends to dawn. And so the silence ended, not with noise, but with music, soft at first, then rising, a symphony without conductor, without center, without end. The threshold opened, and the new world began to breathe. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 34. As threads unravel, new ones begin. The spiral city exhaled. Stone softened. Iron walls became wild gardens. Clock towers unraveled into flowering spirals of sound and shadow. Children woke from long mechanical sleeps, and danced among gears now turned to vines. Elders looked to the sky and saw, not a schedule, but a sky that changed. The dreaming had returned, not to erase the past, but to reweave it with feeling, wonder, breath. And so, the spiral stirred, not as a city of control, but as a living myth, deep beneath the loom core. In the last chamber untouched by the dream, the prime clockmaker stood alone. The machine code of her mind flickered. Precision gave way to questions. This is not according to the design. She reached for the central gear. It had melted into a mirror, and in its surface, she saw her child self, wide-eyed and hopeful. The moment she silenced her first dream to serve the system, and a lion's gaze, unflinching, eternal. She tried to speak a command, but the loom no longer obeyed. The dream had outgrown her. Then let me begin again. For the first time in centuries, the prime clockmaker wept, and her tears became seeds. Eris opened their eyes beneath the spiral sky. The lion sat beside her, fur golden eyes soft. Celis stirred nearby, a smile half formed. It's real, Eris whispered. We chose, and it lived. Velian arrived last, carrying a single fragment of the old loom. It glowed faintly, not as control, but as memory. They stood in the heart of the reformed city, where vines met gears and dreams met dawn. They were no longer who they were. Eris was now a dream bearer. Celis, a guardian of paradox and play. Velian, a remaker of lore. The lion, ever silent, ever watching, became the sacred bridge between instinct and story. Slowly, the city's people began to remember what it was to dream, what it was to feel, and what it was to belong. They painted songs on buildings. They sang gardens into being. They wrote poems on the wind. And in every corner of the spiral, there echoed a new phrase. We are the dreaming ones. Not because they sleep, but because they wake every day, choosing again. To imagine, remember, forgive, create. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 35. The Dream That Remains. The wind moved gently through the spiral. Not the cold, measured wind of regulation, but the warm hush of stories being born. Iris sat on the edge of the city, feet dangling above a newly grown river. The lion rested beside her, tail flicking slowly, eyes watching the horizon where time folded into possibility. Behind them, the city pulsed like a living heart, with music woven into its breath and memory, inked into every wall. They did not speak for a long time. Then Eris turned to the lion. Was this always what we were meant to become? The lion blinked, slow, ancient, not meant, chosen. Eris nodded, as if remembering something she had never learned, and watched the water below trace spirals in the current. Celis approached, barefoot, carrying 3 stones. One from the old spiral, cracked and black. One from the loom core, etched with cure. One from the new gardens, green-veined and soft. She placed them together at the water's edge, not as monument, but as invitation. Velian arrived last, holding a ribbon of light. It had once been part of the prime loom. A strand of control now remade as song. Eris wove it into the stones. It sang. The lion rose. Its gaze moved across them, not as ruler, but as witness. Then it turned, and began to walk. Into the city, through the gate, into the world. Not vanishing, only continuing. The others followed, in silence. Each step a story. Each breath a beginning. They passed children building clocks that bloomed. They passed dancers painting spirals in the sky. They passed elders whispering dreams to seeds. And somewhere in the center of it all, beneath the bones of the old spiral, the dream pulsed, not as fantasy, but as truth. Not something escaped to, but something made again and again. With every choice, with every breath, they did not need to say goodbye to the old world. They had already begun the new one. And still, the dream remained. The end, or perhaps only the beginning. The Lion and the Loom. Epilogue, the Book of the Dreaming Ones. They say there is a book that writes itself, inked not in letters, but in lives. It does not sit on any shelf. It cannot be owned or held. It is written every time a heart remembers the truth of who it is. Every time a child chooses wonder over fear. Every time a maker creates without permission. Every time someone dares to dream, even when the world has told them not to. This book is not a prophecy. It is a remembering of what we were before forgetting, of what we might become again. The lion walks still, through cities, forests, ruins, skies, not to lead, but to listen, to carry the dream, to offer it softly to those ready to remember. You will not know the dreaming ones by their names. You will know them by their quiet eyes, their strange laughter, their way of pausing when the world moves too fast, their ability to see a doorway in the middle of a wall. You might be one of them already. You only need to ask. Not, is it real, but, what am I ready to dream into being? Then listen. The spiral will answer, and the dream will begin again.